Me too. I'm glad you do. It's good to be with you this morning. I'm sorry you're getting second best because Tom isn't able to be here, but I am excited to be with you and to see what God has for us, because here's what I believe this morning. I believe that God has something great for the Bridge Church of the Nazarene. I believe that God has something great for us here this morning, but even more than that, I believe he has someone in mind that will be an amazing pastor for you, and I think he's going to do something beyond anything that we can ask or imagine, both this morning and in the future. Do you believe that? I'm excited to be here. I love worshiping with you this morning. You have a great worship team. Oh, come on. They are really good. The last song we did, the last time I heard that, I was with our district teens in Tampa, Florida at Nazarene Youth Congress. I've learned a few things. I youth pastored for about 8 years before I started pastoring, but in 27 years I'd forgotten some things. I'd forgotten about how youth worship really is. There's 3 words that I would use to describe youth worship. The first one is energetic. The second one is aerobic. And the third one is loud. Every day they assigned where they were seating, and they had a platform shaped a little bit like this, except it extended out a little bit further. And the first Sunday, or the first service, we were scheduled to sit right there. And the speaker was right there. One of the workers called me over, and he held up a bag, and I was like, well, what's this? And he said, well, do you want some? And I looked at it, and they were those earplugs that you shove into your ear. And I thought, well, first I got to tell you, I always kind of subscribed to the idea that if it was too loud, you were too old. And so I was a little bit insulted, actually, when he wanted to give me those earplugs. I figured it was the gray hair. It must have made him think that I would probably need them. And I said, no, I'm fine. And then I couldn't hear for 3 days out of my right ear. I discovered I'm too old. You got to embrace it, right? But it was a great time. I have to tell you, one of the things that I learned at NYC this year is that our church, the Church of the Nazarene, is in great hands with the youth that we have. Worshiping with 10,000 teenagers, basically, was an amazing experience. We were in the Amalie Arena, which is the hockey arena there in Tampa. No ice, so it wasn't that cold, but it was a great time and a wonderful opportunity to see God move among our youth. And I think that God is moving in the Church of the Nazarene. It's been exciting to be in the position that I'm at. I've been in this position kind of for 4 years, since 2019. For 3 of those years, I was part-time with the district and part-time at Wildemar Grace Point. And some of you might have known the church name as Lake Elsinore. It was Lake Elsinore. I went and we changed the name because we weren't in the city anymore. But God is doing some great things on the Southern California district. I was in a meeting a couple of weeks ago where Oni Plantia, our Filipino coordinator, was showing us pictures of a new church in the Philippines. You see, about a year ago, we did a church planting seminar via Zoom for the Philippines. That meant getting up at 2 a.m. in the morning to teach. Maybe we weren't always at our best, but evidently something worked, because since that time, there have been 10 churches planted in the Philippines because of Southern California. Isn't it God good to do stuff like that for us? Here on our district, it's amazing to see the revival that's beginning to break out in our churches. You blessed my heart today when I saw you recognizing Pastor Josue and Pastora Orfa. I love it when that happens. Thank you for taking care of your pastors. Pastors are under attack right now. Since COVID, it's been a hard time for them, but thank you so much for watching over your pastors and taking care of them. I appreciate it, and I know that they do. I know that some of you are hoping I would tell you what's going to happen next here for your pastor, you were hoping when you heard that Tom was going to be here that he would tell you, but neither of us can tell you because that's in God's hands. And he has something that he wants to do. And I think that you want what he wants, not what you want. Lately, I have been kind of captured by the Old Testament narratives, the stories that we grew up with in Sunday school. I'm a fifth generation Nazarene. I was born on a Wednesday and I was in church on Sunday. And I think I've missed twice since then. Maybe 3 times. I don't know. But I remember growing up with the stories, and one of my favorite characters in the Old Testament was always Moses. And I want to take a minute, to look at Moses for just a little bit today. We're going to look at 2 episodes in his life. You remember the story of Moses, right? He was born to a Hebrew slave, and just a little bit after he was born, Pharaoh decided that there were too many Israelite or Hebrew slaves there. Probably in Egypt at that time, there was somewhere around 3 million Hebrews living there, and he decided that if there are that many, there was going to be a problem if they ever rose up in rebellion. And so he decreed that everyone under age 2, all of the male children should be killed. And we know that Moses' mother didn't like that idea. Really, what mother would? Put him in a basket, put him in the Nile, had a sister watch over him until the princess, the Pharaoh's daughter, came and heard little Moses crying and picked him up and decided to adopt him. And his sister ran up and said, "Hey, I've got someone who could be a wet nurse for you. Moses was raised by his mother and by the princess. We remember that he grew up as a grandson of the Pharaoh, and as he grew, he looked out and saw his people. His mom had told him the stories. We know that at one point, Moses saw an Egyptian overseer beating a Hebrew slave, and he attacked the overseer and he killed him, hid the body, and thought, good, I got away with it, until the next day when he saw a couple of Hebrew slaves fighting, and he stopped them, and he said, what are you guys doing? You're brothers. You shouldn't be fighting. They said, well, what are you going to do about it? You going to kill us too? At which point, Moses panicked. He realized that he had been outed and that people knew that he had killed the overseer, and so he took off into the wilderness. We know that he found someone who took him in, and he became a shepherd. And when we find him in Exodus 3, we find that he is a shepherd out in the wilderness watching his sheep. And as we go through, you remember the story. Moses sees a bush that's burning. Now, there's a kind of bush out in that wilderness that can spontaneously combust. So it wasn't unusual to see a burning bush out there. What was unusual was that it didn't stop burning. We're not talking, when we have a wildfire out here, we know that there's enough of the vegetation that it just burns and burns and burns, but out there it's sparse. And so he saw the smoke and he thought, well, there's another bush going up, and then he saw it a little bit later and he thought, well, it's still going, and then he saw it a little bit later and he thought, well, maybe there's something to go check out there because this is unusual. And so he heads over there, and we know the story. He gets there, walks up toward the burning bush, and he hears a voice that says, Moses, take off your shoes, for you're on holy ground. Moses' first thought, I'm sure, was, this is different. Then the voice blows his world out of the water. Moses, go and tell Pharaoh, let my people go. So Moses begins with the excuses. You've never given excuses to God, have you? We don't do that, right? But God, what do I tell the people when they don't believe me? Moses, what's that in your hand? Well, God, it's my shepherd's rod. shepherds carried a rod, which is kind of a long stick made for defense. It's about defense against the animals that might attack or other people trying to steal sheep. And then they carried the staff. That's that thing you recognize, the one with the big crook on the top, the shepherd's crook, the rod and the staff. And he says it's a rod, and God tells him, Moses, throw it down on the ground. But God, you don't understand. Moses, throw it down. But God, out here, a man needs a rod for security. Moses, throw it down. But God, you don't understand. I had to run away from everything. I had everything. I had the world. I had to throw it all away. I had to run away. This is all I have. Don't take from me the only thing that I can call my own. Moses, throw it down. And we know that when Moses threw the rod on the ground, it turned into a hissing snake, a snake prepared to strike. And Moses ran away because he was afraid. Duh! But he was afraid not only of the snake, but also what God was going to do. He was afraid of what God would do when God truly got a hold of Moses. So God said, Moses, pick up the snake by the tail. Oh, God, you don't understand. You never pick up a hissing snake by the tail. You get a stick and you pin its head to the ground, and then you think really, really hard about whether you actually want to pick it up or not. Moses, pick it up by the tail. But God, I could die. Moses, pick it up by the tail. You sure? And we know what happened when he grabbed the snake by the tail. It became a rod. But when Moses picked up the rod, it was no longer the rod of Moses. From that point on in the narrative, it's called the rod of God. And with the rod of Moses, when you raise it up in front of a body of water, your arms get tired. But with the rod of God, when you raise it up in front of a body of water, the water parts, the ground dries, 3 million people walk through, and then you drown the Egyptian army. And with the rod of Moses, when you hit a rock, your arms hurt. But with the rod of God, when you hit a rock, enough water for 3 million people comes pouring out. So when God told Moses to go talk to Pharaoh, here's what we can learn. The first thing we can learn off today is that where God guides, he provides. God tells Moses in Exodus 3:10, so now go, I'm sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israel, out of Egypt. He didn't say, I'm going to send you to argue with Pharaoh. He didn't say, I'm going to go and hope that Pharaoh lets you go. He said, I'm going to take you there, and I'm going to have you bring my people out, no question. Because with the rod of God, you have his power and his presence. And with the rod of God, there's nothing that you can't accomplish. And with the rod of God, you cannot be defeated. So I have a question for you. What's that in your hand? What are you holding on that represents to you your security? What are you holding on to that represents to you something that's totally yours? What are you holding on to today? Maybe it's a relationship. Maybe it's a job. Maybe it's a position. Maybe it's a church. I have a word from the Lord for you this morning. Throw it down. Give up that relationship. Give up that job. Give up that position. Give up that thing that you hold on to for security. Give up that thing that makes you who you are. Give it up to him and watch what happens, because he's not going to take it from you. He's going to tell you to pick it back up, and it's not going to be yours anymore. It's going to be his, and there's nothing you can't do with it. Relationships get healed because we've laid them down at his feet, not because we've gone to a counselor, although counseling is important. Don't get me wrong. Jobs become something bigger, not because we do better, but because we've surrendered them to him. And churches move forward, not because we work harder, but because we give them to him, and he does something beyond anything we could ask or imagine. What's that in your hand? Throw it down today. And watch what he does. Because wherever God guides, he always provides. The other thing I think we need to hear today out of another episode in Moses' life is that when we wait, he abides. When we wait, he abides. Exodus 33, we're jumping ahead 30 chapters. God tells Moses in Exodus 33:3, go up to the land flowing with milk and honey, but I will not go with you because you are a stiff-necked people, and I might destroy you on the way. Oh, good news. Now, as I look across this room, I know that there are no stiff-necked people in here, right? You might know someone who's a stiff-necked person, but it's not you, right? How hard would that be to hear Moses tell the people, well, God said he's sending us, but he's not going with us because we're a stiff-necked people, and he might kill us on the way. Goes on. Continuing on in Exodus 33, beginning at verse 12. Moses said to the Lord, you have told me to lead these people, but you did not say whom you would send with me. You have said to me, I know you very well, and I am pleased with you. And if you have truly pleased me, show me your plans so that I may know you and continue to please you. Remember that this nation is your people. And the Lord answered, I myself will go with you, and I will give you victory. And then Moses said to him, if you yourself do not go with us, then don't send us away from this place. You see, Moses found that he had to be sure that he had God's presence with him. And he waited for the assurance that God was with him before he was ready to move on. Too often, we think that a quick prayer is all we need. But sometimes, God has to work on us so that we can be ready for his presence. Too often we think that we have everything in hand. And we think we know the plans. Or at least we have plans. Maybe it's time to pause and to wait and to find out what God's plan is. Maybe it's time to stop and to pray. Not some grocery list kind of prayer. You know the kind we need. God, we need this, 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 and this. Oh, and while you're there. But maybe some time spent on our knees, not seeking the plan, but seeking his face, discovering who he is. And then we can see the plan. And then we can say with him, God, go with us. And if you don't go, don't send us. And in a church in transition like this one, maybe the prayer is, Lord, you know we need a pastor. But God, we want your pastor. And we don't want to do anything to thwart your plan. One of my other favorite characters in the Bible is Habakkuk. Habakkuk just tells the truth. You go from him saying everything is terrible to him saying, but God's got it in hand. Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 3 tells us this: for the revelation awaits an appointed time. It speaks of the end and will not prove false. Though it linger, wait for it, and it will certainly come and will not delay. You ever heard the phrase, God's perfect time? Do you believe that God has a perfect time? Sorry to meddle here for just a minute. But do you act like you believe that God has a perfect plan and a perfect time?